Chapter 3. Encounter. Hard, cold, and scratchy were the 3 words that most adequately described my bed. Only an inch separated me from the metal framing. Only a single foot separated the mattress from the sterile concrete floor. I'd woken and couldn't get back to sleep. I couldn't leave, so the only thing I could do was stare into the darkness and listen. The other bodies in the room shifted uncomfortably in their bunks. A loud snort or snore occasionally cut through the silence and echoed off the gray, featureless walls. Most of us have learned to get by on less than 5 hours of sleep a night. The soldiers who had volunteered knew what we were getting into when we joined. The conscripted men found out soon enough. There were a few sharp clicks, and suddenly the barracks were flooded with a dim red light. A speaker turned on, hummed, and a man over the intercom shouted,
"Soldiers found dead in the compound. Search and eliminate any enemy presence. Do not attempt to capture."
In an instant, the sleeping quarters were alive with activity. Men hopped down from bunks and hurriedly threw on uniforms over their night clothes. The rattle of rifles and shouts of squadrons forming up filled the room and hallways. The speaker gushed more warnings, but the words were lost in the uproar. I bounded out of my bunk, dressed, and grabbed my rifle from its resting place. I eyed the writhing mass of men in search of my squad mates. I managed to locate Alvin's unruly mop of hair bobbing through the crowd.
"Alvin!"
I shouted, waving him over. He shouldered his way through the crowd to join me.
"Who did we lose?"
I asked. Alvin cocked his head to one side.
It was Cooper's night patrol group. Apparently one of their bodies fell from the rafters onto an officer taking a bathroom break.
He chuckled grimly. My stomach turned. One expects a certain amount of death in this line of work, but it's usually more sudden. A bullet to the neck or an artillery shell taking a leg, but never something so calculated and personal. Alvin was better at dealing with gore than I was, or at least he was better at hiding his aversion to it. I hugged my gun close to my chest, as if it would protect me of its own accord. It was a small comfort, but I take those when I can get them.
Are you feeling nervous, Rosie?
Alvin said, punching my shoulder. I let his use of the nickname slide. I didn't have time to be annoyed.
"Let's form up with the others,"
I ordered. I nudged Alvin, and we made our way to our squad's rally point. Ferguson and Barrett were already there waiting for us. We greeted them with a nod.
"All right, let's get moving,"
I chirped.
Rosie is going to lead us to glory, boys.
Alvin joked.
Have a little respect, Alvin.
Barrett scolded.
That kind of insubordination will have you scrubbing toilets until your hands are raw.
Let's hurry,
Yawned Ferguson.
"Follow me,"
I commanded, eager to cut off their squabbling. Our group headed to the barracks door and made our way at a brisk pace down the hallway. The other squadrons had already departed for their individual routes. We had drilled what to do in the case of a base infiltration, and we had a pattern to follow. We followed a set path, checking several critical entry and exit points, as well as passing by doors that contained certain valuable assets. I didn't have the faintest idea as to what kind of assets lurked behind the heavy steel doors. It wasn't part of the job. We hit the first point, an intersection of 4 nondescript hallways.
"Clear,"
I said. Alvin answered.
Clear.
Ferguson seconded.
clear.
Clear.
Barrett confirmed. So far, so good, I thought. We hustled quickly to the next checkpoint. After several twists and turns through the nearly identical passageways, we arrived at the next point. Exiting the hallway, we entered into a storage warehouse. Ugly metal fixtures swung weakly above our heads. Their light dimly illuminated the room, throwing hazy shadows along the boxes and among the corners. The upper portions of the room near the beams and ceiling stayed shrouded in shadow. This area housed equipment, vehicles, and crates of ammo and weapons. However, it was also home to more mysterious items. There was a heavy steel door locked up tight with the newest top-of-the-line security scanners on one end. Above it, the shiny glass eye of a camera glared down accusingly at us. I didn't linger on it. As a member of the bunker team, I'd gotten used to being observed. This point was clear as well. The area was completely silent, save for our ragged breathing.
Clear.
I sniffed. Alvin sounded back.
Clear.
We were met with silence. I spun around. Ferguson and Barrett were nowhere to be seen, and there was no indication of where they might have gone. Neither one of the men would have abandoned our task. Something must have happened to them, but why didn't I hear it? I glanced toward Alvin.
Where did they go?
I asked. Sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead.
I have no idea.
He said through clenched teeth.
They were with us at the previous checkpoint, and I didn't hear anything.
He gently slapped his cheeks, trying to regain his composure. Alvin was getting nervous, and that rarely happened.
Do we keep going to the next checkpoint, or?
Alvin's voice drifted off. We both already knew the answer. In a situation such as this, soldiers do get left behind. It was protocol to continue the sweep even in the event of losing a comrade. I had a decision to make. Do I order that we double back in order to look for Barrett and Ferguson, or do we keep going to the next checkpoint? I took a step toward Alvin.
We'll leave the warehouse and continue the sweep like we are meant to,
I said firmly. Alvin frowned. He knew it was protocol too, but it wasn't the order he wanted to hear.
But we can go down that hall and take the next 2 right turns. That will take us back toward where we could have lost them and will raise less suspicion than going backward.
I finished. I shrugged my shoulders.
If we get caught, just tell them I ordered you to accompany me.
I smirked. Alvin tugged thoughtfully at his earlobe, thinking.
Okay,
He muttered.
let's go.
We headed out of the warehouse through another door into yet another featureless corridor. Alvin and I bounded down the hallway. Our equipment bounced roughly against each of our bodies with every heavy step. We made it to the intersection of passages and veered right, heading off our prescribed path. Soon after I turned the corner, I slipped and fell hard to the floor, landing on my back. Alvin, who had been following close behind, tripped and fell on top of me.
Ow!
I groaned. I pushed Alvin off me. My hands were sticky and red. Had Alvin injured himself when he fell on me, I thought.
Alvin!
I grabbed him roughly by the collar and shook him.
Are you hurt?
I'm fine.
He said, confused.
What are you talking?
He went silent, and the color drained from his face. He realized why I asked him about his well-being. We were both lying in a shallow pool of blood. Arms and legs flailing, we scrambled out of the wretched liquid.
Who? What? How?
Sputtered Alvin.
What happened here?
He choked. If this was the blood of one of my men, they didn't have much time left.
Keep moving!
I barked. We rushed to the second turn in the labyrinth of hallways and re-entered the warehouse. Dust particles floated like ghosts in the ill light. That's where I found one. It was Barrett. He was running madly with a severed arm that vomited a spray of blood with every frenzied step he took. He ran past me screaming,
Monster! Monster!
I snapped my head backward to follow Barrett's movements, and then something was upon him. A dark shape came from above and landed on Barrett's shoulders, knocking him to the ground. The figure stood from its crouched position. It was a man. The man let a body slide off his shoulders, and it hit the ground with a thud.
Calm down.
The man sighed.
I didn't even have time to hide this body.
I squinted. The body he dropped looked familiar. The corpse was tall with a shaved head. My stomach clenched and I felt like I would vomit. The dead body was Ferguson. It was clear that a stab wound to the back coupled with a slit throat had prevented him from screaming. He probably drowned in his own blood. The man spoke again in a cold and callous voice.
Well, no point in letting you suffer.
Then, using his foot, the inhuman invader rolled Barrett onto his back. The man unsheathed a long, curved sword from a holster on his back and slashed sideways at Barrett's neck. A heavy spray of blood leaped through the air and stained the assailant's clothes.
And that's that.
He said gleefully. The killer swung the sword through the air, throwing the blood dirtying the blade onto the floor. He glanced over casually at me and smiled coldly. He may have moved like a demon, but it was definitely a person. Despite his impressive feats of strength, the man's body was lean. His attire was more suited to a casual cafe than for an assassination mission. His face was smooth, but his features were hard. This was a man who had taken countless lives. The more I stared, the less sense it made. This wasn't a monster with leathery wings and razor-sharp claws. It was a man who had somehow managed to kill multiple trained soldiers. I was frozen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It had to be a bad dream, right? I'll wake up in my cot at any moment, won't I? Alvin had kept his wits better than I had for once. Roaring, he raised his rifle and started firing wildly in the direction of the unknown man. Nothing connected, and the man dove behind a crate. Making no attempt to save two dead men, I took cover behind a nearby vehicle. I couldn't allow myself the luxury of feeling grief just yet. First, I had to make sure Alvin and I survived this encounter. I readied my rifle and prepared to fire. If the man reemerged from behind the crate, I would be ready to end him. Alvin and I waited, but nothing happened. I shot a few times at the crate, daring him to show himself. The gunshots echoed off the walls and faded into silence, but he still didn't make a move. The man never attempted to return fire or gave any indication that he was still behind the crate. Alvin silently gave a hand signal to communicate to me that he would join me behind my cover where we could regroup. He turned on his heels and marched toward my position, but he didn't make it more than a few steps. The man suddenly and silently leaped on top of the crate and flung his sword like a spear. It whistled through the air and impaled Alvin through the back and stomach.
Oh!
He choked. Blood leaked from Alvin's mouth as he slid down the blade to the floor.
Alvin!
I shouted. I rushed to the side of my fallen friend. He wasn't dead yet. He could still make it.
I'm going to get you out of here.
I wheezed, turning him over. I had to keep the blade in. Removing it would cause him to bleed out. He would be dead in minutes. I heard the clack-tap of approaching footsteps, but I didn't have time to look behind me. I put Alvin's arm around my shoulder, hoisted him up, and started to move toward the exit. Alvin gasped and hissed through clenched teeth. The sword was being pulled backward out of his body. His wound spurted and gushed blood, and he went from limp to entirely dead weight. I lost my footing and was dragged down with him. I rolled over onto my back and was met with the imposing figure of the man. I tried to crawl backward, my eyes never breaking from the cruel man's piercing gaze. He came closer and put his foot onto my chest and pressed hard. As the air left my lungs, the man chuckled softly. He lifted his blade, preparing to slash. I brought up my rifle and attempted to block it. I was successful to some extent. Though I had deflected the blade and halted the killing blow, in doing so it had knocked my helmet away. The helmet went spinning down the corridor, spilling my short, unkempt, blonde hair from its hiding place and revealing the entirety of my face. The man leaned forward a bit and squinted. His teeth flashed a knowing smirk. Positioning his blade an inch from my throat, he brought his foot down harder on my chest, holding me in place.
A woman?
He mused. He lightly touched my neck with his steel, causing a small drop of blood to blossom forth from a vein. A thin river of blood began to trickle down my neck. The man's blade gleamed red. I used his paws to make a grab for my sidearm. I unholstered it and fired a single shot point blank at the man's head. His head jerked to the side. The sound of the single shot echoed off the walls and died away. The man was still standing. He turned his face back toward me. A shallow red gash marked his cheek where the bullet had grazed his face. Drops of his blood fell to the floor next to my head. He could bleed after all.
Ow.
He muttered, wiping the wound with the back of his hand. Still pinning me down with his foot, the man stared coldly into my eyes. It was only for a few moments, but it felt like I was frozen in time. Gradually, his expression changed. His face softened, and he looked puzzled and a little confused. I didn't give much thought to his change in demeanor. I shut my eyes and waited for the end. Suddenly, the pressure on my lungs lifted, and, opening one eye, I saw his back turned, walking away. For some unknown reason, he had spared my life. I let my body relax and fall to the floor. Shutting my eyes, I let out a deep sigh of relief. Just as my erratic breathing calmed, a cry over the loudspeaker roused me from my trance. The announcement chilled me to the bone. Our leader, General Dunn, had been found dead in his quarters.